This man was the recipient of a wailing bear's dying cub. And the extraordinary thing that took place was that it was early in the morning when Daniel first arrived. Heard a strange rustling sound coming from outside his cabin at first. He thought it was just the wind stirring the trees, but then it grew louder, more intense. Something was moving, something big. He stepped cautiously to the window, parting the curtains, just enough to peer out into the dense forest, his breath caught in his chest. When he saw her, a large female bear standing just at the edge of the trees, her dark fur almost blending into the shadows. But it wasn't her size that caught Daniel off guard. It was the way she was moving. She wasn't walking with purpose like a normal bear. She was pacing, circling in an almost frantic way, her head down, her body tense. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as he looked out the window, barely believing what he was seeing. The bear wasn't just pacing, she was moving with a strange urgency, like she was searching for something or someone. Her large dark eyes scanned the forest, then locked onto the cabin. Her ears flicked nervously. Daniel stayed frozen, unsure of what to do. Bears weren't supposed to act like this. They were usually solitary creatures, and this one seemed desperate. Her movements were slow but deliberate, almost like she was trying to communicate something. Then out of the thick trees, something else appeared, a small shape, much smaller than the mother bear, struggling to keep up with her. At first, Daniel thought it was just a blur, but as it came closer, he could see it clearly. It was a cub, a tiny bear, barely able to walk, with its head hanging low. Daniel's stomach tightened. The cub looked sick, weak. It stumbled a few steps before collapsing into the grass. The mother bear immediately stopped, looking back at her baby. She nudged the cub, but it didn't move. Instead, the mother turned her head toward the cabin, and for the first time their eyes met. It was as if she was looking for help. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the mother bear nudge her cub, trying desperately to get it to move. The cub's tiny body barely responded. It was limp, its fur matted and dirty, and Daniel could see the labored rise and fall of its chest. The mother bear made a soft whimpering sound, her eyes never leaving the cub, as she carefully licked its face, trying to revive it. Daniel did not move, and he was uncertain as to whether the bear was watching him out of fear or trust. However, one thing was abundantly clear. This was not a typical visit. The mother bear was in pain, and the cub was dying. The youngster's eyes were closed, and its breathing was faint. Daniel could hear the faint wheezing from where he stood. His thoughts raced. Could he help? Was there even anything he could do? He knew little about wild animals' health, especially not about bears. But one thing was certain: the cub needed care, and it needed it now. The mother bear let out another mournful sound, and then, to Daniel's shock, she slowly looked up at him. Her eyes were full of pleading, filled with a deep, raw desperation. It was as if she knew he was her last hope. Without thinking, Daniel felt his feet move toward the door. Daniel's heart hammered his chest as he stood in the doorway, staring at the bear, at her dying cub. Every instinct screamed at him to stay inside, to keep a safe distance. Bears were unpredictable, wild creatures. But something in the mother's eyes stopped him, something that felt like a silent plea. Taking a deep breath, Daniel slowly stepped outside, the cool morning air filling his lungs. The bear watched him, her eyes never leaving him. For a second he moved cautiously, slowly, keeping his body low and non-threatening. He was careful not to make any sudden movements, afraid that any wrong step could provoke her. When he reached the cub, he knelt down, keeping a good distance from the mother. The little bear was still breathing, but barely. Its fur was matted, and its body felt so light, almost fragile in Daniel's hands. He could feel the heat of its fever, and his stomach churned with helplessness. The mother bear made a low noise, a soft grunt, but didn't move. She seemed to trust Daniel for now. Her eyes stayed focused on him, as if waiting for him to make the right decision. With trembling hands, in a manner that was as kind as possible, Daniel picked up the cub and started walking back towards the cabin. As he did so, he glanced back at the mother bear, who had not moved from her position and was still watching him. He muttered to her in a barely audible voice, "I'll help him." Once they were inside the cabin, Daniel carefully placed the cub on a soft blanket close to the fire. The young bear did not move at all. Its breathing was ragged, and its eyes were barely open. Daniel's hand shook as he checked for injuries. There were none visible. However, it was obvious that the cub was dehydrated, weak from hunger, and suffering from fever. He had to act quickly. Daniel ran to his small supply of medicines. Although he was not a veterinarian, he was a wildlife biologist, so he knew a few things about treating animals that were in distress. He grabbed a syringe, filled it with water, and administered the fluids in a careful manner. The cub barely responded, its tiny body shuddering As he gently placed a syringe in its mouth for the next few hours, Daniel worked tirelessly. He tried to feed the cub some soup mild with nutrients. He wrapped the cub in blankets to keep it warm, his heart sinking with every passing minute as he saw how fragile the little bear was. The cabin felt silent, except for the occasional soft crackle from the fire. Through it all, Daniel couldn't shake the thought that this was far beyond the work he had ever signed up for. But one thing was clear: the cub was fighting. It had to be. Through the window, Daniel saw the mother bear waiting outside. Her presence was a constant reminder of the silent trust between them. After days of care, the cub's condition began to improve. It started to open its eyes more, its movements growing stronger. Daniel couldn't help but smile as the cub wobbled around the cabin, its tiny steps still shaky, but filled with life. It wasn't completely healed yet, but it was better, and Daniel knew deep down that it was time. One morning, as the sun filtered softly through the trees, the cub stumbled toward the door, its eyes fixed on something outside. Daniel followed its gaze through the cabin window. He saw the mother bear standing at the edge of the forest, her eyes locked on the cub. She hadn't moved from her spot all morning, waiting patiently. Daniel opened the door slowly, and the cub immediately bolted toward the mother. The moment the cubs saw her, it rushed into her embrace, and she nuzzled it gently. They both stayed there for a moment, their bond evident and unbroken. Daniel stood back, watching them from the doorway, his heart ached. But he knew this was right. The cub was ready to return to the wild, to be with its mother. Before leaving, the mother bear turned to Daniel. She looked at him, silent and steady, without a sound. She gave him one last lingering gaze, a look of gratitude, of recognition, and then turned into the forest with her cub by her.